isn't my world. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This isn't my world. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This isn't my world. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. Disappointed. Wait a minute. Disappointed. Very disappointed. Wait a minute. 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 Disap Wait a minute. This isn't my world. Disappointed! Very disappointed! Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This isn't my world. Disappointed! Very disappointed! Wait a minute. Disappointed! Disappointed! Very disappointed! Wait a minute.
We are live. Hello, lovely audience. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Your Biz Monday. Nicole, how you been?
Hey Seth, how's it going? I'm really excited because this episode's going to be a little bit different from normal. We're not doing a coin review. We're kind of talking about world news and how that could potentially affect the price of cryptocurrency. I know everybody's excited about alt season being back in full swing.
Oh my gosh.
But what if it's not?
Uh-oh, I hadn't considered that. So it sounds like tonight we're going to go over several possible influences that will affect alt season, either its return or kind of show that we've got a couple of market influences that people just need to be a little more tuned into. I think China mentals is something that the cryptocurrency industry is used to hearing about, but I don't think that they have their eyes trained on the side of the world that we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that there's just a lot going on. And so we've got two guests. John, who is not with us yet, John Sneeson, the economic truth. He just told me that he's restarting his computer because Brave browser crashed. And then we've got Martellus. He's an intrepid journalist who's spent some of his life working with immigrant and Muslim migrant workers in Europe.
Awesome. Martellus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We appreciate you spending the time. I understand that you're not in our time zone. Nicole and I, we're so close to the Pacific time zone that we wind up asking everybody east of us to stay up a bit late. So appreciate you being game to do this with us tonight.
Absolutely.
So while we wait for our next guest to join us, Nicole, I'm going to go over. I've got some news open right now. This is kind of breaking. It's not world news per se. It affects us here in the continental United States as it relates to COVID-19 and the closure of infrastructure, the effects of COVID-19, knock-on effects of COVID-19 on the market. And Governor Gavin Newsom of California just announced today that basically all of California shut down again in a very, very meaningful way. Places of worship, gyms, restaurants, hair salons, barbershops, any place that people would typically congregate. He's pretty much said, no, we're shutting you down. There's no leeway. There's no wiggle room. There are no exemptions. There are no special passes for any kind of essential categories of these types of businesses. They're just shut down. And I've got a list of all the counties in which they're shut down off to the screen right. But every place from San Diego all the way up to the northern border of California is basically just locked down, and from the coast all the way in to the far inland empire and even out in the desert. So California is pretty much shut down. That's here at home domestically. So if that's happening here at home domestically, and we know what the effects of the last 3 months have been on people's wallet books and on the small to mid-sized business owner, I'm looking forward to hearing what we talk about in the international community. But this is so close to home. I had to bring it up today, kind of mark the day that on the 13th of July, that here in the States, we're seeing everything locked down yet again. It's happening.
Yeah. What about where you live, Seth? Have you started to notice any businesses start to shut back down that maybe reopen for a little while?
Barbershops, no. I go to a gym that has been it's been meticulous about taking care and about asking patrons to be very thoughtful of other patrons. There have been zero known outbreaks as a result of the gym that I go to and of the municipal services where I live. But in the state where I live, there have been some additional cases. So So yeah, the governor is talking about shutting down certain counties, and certain mayors are talking about shutting down certain classifications of business. So it's happening again here too, even in states that have been really careful and kept their infection rate really low. They're playing good citizen as well, so to speak, and helping these other states not feel like they're in it alone. But to what end? I don't know. I don't know if we can show that the business closures have been the primary cause for a decrease in infection. How about you?
So what do you think that's going to...
So,
All right, John just said this lags hard. This just lags hard.
okay, so I'm going to mouse over his internet connection. It looks like he's got incoming. Yeah, he's not sending many packets our way. He's got good download speed, but the connection is not good in our direction.
Okay, let me just let him know.
And yeah, let him know he's doxxed. You can turn off the VPN for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Real talk. If the NSA wants you, they got you.
Right. Oh, there he is. I can see John. John, can you see us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Awesome. I can hear
Yes.
you.
It's really laggy.
Okay, we'll be very cautious.
Okay.
We'll be sure to give you a very deliberate opening for Q&A, and
It's stabilized.
and really appreciate you spending time with us tonight. John, welcome to the show.
Hello?
Okay, I think we're gonna have intermittent cutting out with.
Hi.
All right, cool. So should we have everyone kind of self-credential, or are you going to talk about what gives various people who are talking today about, so John, you are an economic historian. You've written 2 best-selling books about economic history. So you can speak with some authority about the potential for what's going on right now in the world to impact the price of cryptocurrency.
Hell, I know it's a bit laggy. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna try something else here. Like I never used this program, so.
Okay, if you're behind a VPN, then maybe consider turning off your VPN for the duration of the program, so that you have greater bandwidth. Okay, while we're waiting for John's tech to catch up to the show, why don't we go ahead and introduce our other guest, Martellus. You mentioned before, Nicole, that Martellus has lived in conflict-torn areas and been able to witness firsthand some of the concerns, especially of Muslim populations, and see firsthand what the effects have been in recent years of war-torn areas like Libya. And especially, I think Martellus also mentioned that he interacts in a significant way with many Algerian natives in where he lives. Go ahead and okay, that goes through there.
Okay, let's try this. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. Something with my computer for some reason. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, that's great.
Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go for a quick drive, and I'm going to get some really good connection on LTE. So just bear with me.
Okay, for sure. Go ahead and give us the high sign when you're in an area that you are more comfortable.
Sounds good.
Oh yeah, we could mute you until your connection is a little bit better,
just
right?
mute me, yeah. Yeah, or hair.
Awesome.
Okay. So while we're waiting for John to get to an area where he's got greater coverage with his phone, so we can get a better, clearer connection, let's wrap with Martellus a bit about some of the background, bit of some of the experience and history. Martellus, you've been in some bad situations, or you've witnessed some bad situations, and you've rubbed elbows with some folks who have had to live through this. Let's jump back a few years. What were you doing that brought you from some of those experiences in journalism and in what you were doing professionally to now start crossing over into cryptocurrency or blockchain?
Good question. I kind of, I've been in tech most of my adult life, so I kind of watched cryptocurrency mature, or at least to the point that it is now. I didn't really begin to get truly involved, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say this, but until 2017. So I was in the south of France at the time, and it was previous to all of the conflict that we now see in the Middle East. But as you know, as time went on, I started to notice that this is more than just a fad, and probably at some point will be the go-to solution for exchange. And so I don't know if they were in any way connected, but along the way, I did, I kind of paid attention to what was happening in cryptocurrency, and then eventually started to get involved, just because I came to my own conclusion that this is the wave of the future. I think everybody in crypto probably has come to that same conclusion at some point. So I'm a firm believer that this is definitely the way the wind is blowing.
Okay, awesome. And your very first exposure, or rather use cases, when you went become a practical user of cryptocurrency and really get on board in 2017. What was the motion that you took to get onboarded? Did you look at the Coinbase onboarding mechanism? Did you use something like local Bitcoins to go pick up some cryptocurrency from somebody face to face?
Well, I do now. I actually there are a couple of shops, because where I am, it's a bit more complicated to get your hands on it. I don't like doing that because there's usually taxes and fees and like that. But yeah, Coinbase was my first onboarding experience, and then I quickly moved to Bitstamp. And then, all of a few other exchanges I've used as well. But I would say that Bitstamp is probably my go-to platform for buying and selling.
Okay, awesome. And has that changed at all in the last couple of years?
Have things changed at all in the last couple of years?
For you, yes. Within cryptocurrency, yes.
One of the coins that I watch closely is XRP, and anybody that watches XRP knows that it's very boring and has been just a sequential flat line for a very long period of time. So that's I pay a lot of attention to that, just because of the relationships that they've built with international monetary systems and the international settlements. Related to companies like MoneyGram, Western Union. There was some talk at some point of an overlay on SWIFT, and I just think that there's some things going on in the background there that probably would catapult it to the foreground in the event that some type of exchange mechanism became immediately necessary if the one in place were someday.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. So it sounds like for you, XRP is your canary in the coal mine, or Signal I will say. Maybe not of anything going wrong, but potentially of something changing.
I think so. Yeah, that's what I would watch.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, Nicole, can you get us kicked off? What direction do we direction do we start with this in? I mean, I know this was meant to be a bit more free flow. We've got John
so I'm
back on.
just trying to figure out. Yeah, we're less structured than normal tonight, right? Because I don't exactly know how to start this conversation. Like, at what point, how familiar with what's going on the other side of the world? Is everyone in cryptocurrency, or is everyone just talking about the price pumping and unrelated to kind of world events? I'm not sure. So,
okay, well, I mean, sure. For my part, I can't imagine why anybody. Go ahead.
From a North African standpoint, or from a Middle Eastern standpoint, it's just not what they're concerned about right now. It really isn't. I mean, they've got a reintroduction to some base priorities that don't include cryptocurrency at present. And, I think that it's catching on. And, I come in contact with here to cryptocurrency. I tell them how they can buy, where to buy, what to buy. And then I say, this is not financial advice, but follow that up with that, of course. But I think that in most of the Western European countries, it is very, it's prevalent, it's well known. They participate as much as North America. So I think that's, kind of what the situation is with people that are in less fortunate areas. They just don't have time to really consider it. But I think, China's in Asia, they're making some very strong moves towards full-on implementation. I mean, that's something to pay attention to as well.
Hey, John's ready.
Awesome. That was pretty epic. So we've recorded the journey from the home out to a spot that has enough signal to start in the video chat. That was this is going to be a great replay there. But let's see, we have you muted, I think.
Yep.
So I'll let that unmute himself.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, no, I had to get some LTE connection here, so thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah, no, worth the wait. This is a good one. This is a rare treat where we get to talk about not primarily crypto.
Kind of topic that we've been teasing.
Nicole, go ahead. There's a bit of lag. So yeah, so occasionally there will be some overlap. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Okay, so kind of the topic that we've been teasing has been about what's going on with Israel and annexing the West Bank, and what that means for some Islamic countries that, I don't know, cryptocurrency is really, really a lot bigger in parts of the Islamic world than it is in the US. And I know this because I've lived there. So not actually when cryptocurrency was, so my time spent in the Middle East was in 2009 and 2010. So that would have basically been, Bitcoin's infancy. That's not something that I heard discussed while I was there, but in some of my friend circles of people who still live over there, I can say that it's a lot more prevalent than it is in the US.
So, John, has that been? Apologies.
There's, for example, like Turkey. We got Turkey. It actually has one of the biggest adoptions in the kind of Arab Peninsula, and of course in Turkey also they have the biggest black markets when it comes to avoiding taxes, and you see that it's very interesting when you see that with a lot of countries around the world. including Norway as well. We have higher adoption of cryptocurrency because people are trying to avoid the massive taxation that we're seeing. And that seems to be a kind of recurring theme that's happening around the world is, people doesn't want the government to, tax themselves to death. And like, look at here in Canada now, we had a deficit of our government that, tenfolded just in 1 year. And they're expecting that will not have any consequences for, more taxes coming down the line. You'd be stupid to believe that. So it's really sickening to watch. People believe so much in government around the world, and it's becoming very frustrating to see this constant erosion of freedoms, and especially now with COVID-19 that we're seeing now. Everybody's turning against the people, and now it's okay to spy on everybody suddenly. Everybody is the government is allowed to do whatever it wants. We basically got medical tyranny, where they could tell us what to do without our own consent. So we're starting to kind of topple, and this has also always been the case when any empire falls. They will go very desperate at the end, and it's not that I want it to happen or anything, but it seems like that's the way that the United States empire is willing to go, and I think there's unfortunately no way out of it, because who wants to give up the massive power you have by having the one world reserve currency that everybody's using, and that you can control everybody, like we were talking about in Arab countries like Iran, and a whole bunch of other countries that they basically are controlling with their SWIFT system, which actually is horrible, guys. I just had a wire transfer. My dad passed away, unfortunately, and so having a couple of wire transfers coming over. It's been taking 12 days now instead of 10 minutes with a block coming through. So you can see the frustration. Like the old system is dying, and they're not willing to kind of let it go. They're willing to just double down, and that's what you see with the central banks and everybody now. They're just buying everything left, right, and center that they could buy of assets to keep propping the system up, and that's what's going to keep on going until there's nothing else. Like I wrote an article 3.5 years ago now called "The Federal Reserve Will Own Everything Then Nothing," and I believe that that's the trajectory that we're going. And it's not that I just pulled that out of nowhere. I actually looked at Japan. And in Japan, for example, the central bank owns 86.11% of all the ETFs.
Jeez.
That has been, that was further back. So it's probably closer to 90% now. Who knows what the number is? But yeah, they hold stocks, real estate, everything at the Bank of Japan. And of course, that I saw that everybody is talking about kind of Bank of Japan and everything, how they fought, because basically they were on a demographic cliff where the population was aging. And in a fiat currency system, you have to have constant inflation. You can't have deflation. So, of course, they had to buy everything because they were on a deflationary track with, people actually lowering their impact on debt and all this stuff. And so that's what we're facing now, and especially in Canada, the U.S., and in Germany, and a couple other European states right now.
Wow. Okay. So there's so much for us to branch out from right there. Nicole, where do you want to take this?
Yeah, what I want to ask is, John, what do you think the probability is that Bitcoin is an attempt, or was an attempt, by the old world order or the regime that is currently being toppled to maintain global dominance?
Well, I've been thinking about it ever since. I think 2012 I got involved in crypto. In Bitcoin, because there was nothing. Well, there was two other currencies. There was Dogecoin and Litecoin at the time, I remember. But back at that time in 2013 or 14, I believe I wrote an article, what would be the next world one world currency, and I actually looked at Bitcoin versus the dollar back in 2013, and I saw that it has a potential, but of course. Even though that the U.S. government created this as a psyop to take everything over, it's not really a very good way to do it.
The revolution.
Yeah, but it's not easy to do because it's so distributed. Yeah.
To support it.
Yeah, it's very distributed. First of all, so the government has kind of lost track on it, and of course, I feel that they might have tried. They might have put these ideas out. The government is always there. In the shadows trying to do stuff, but this has gotten way out of hand. It's like BitTorrent. I always compare Bitcoin and BitTorrent. Have they ever been able to ban BitTorrent, like ban illegal downloading through BitTorrent? No, because it's a distributed system. And you can't kill distributed systems. People say, "Oh, we're just going to shut down the internet." How are we going to shut down the internet? People today are actually building decentralized internet infrastructure. Like I come from the telecom world, so like I built like infrastructure for internet and cell phone communications and stuff. And now we're seeing a lot of people are decentralizing away from these massive conglomerates that you have AT&T. Verizon, all these borderline monopolies in states in the U.S., of course. Here in Canada, it's some of the most priciest in the world. I think the way the world will evolve through this is where we're going, and this is a natural cycle throughout history. So we're going from the move to heavy centralization. People get sick of getting governed, and then you get a slow move over to decentralization again. And that's where we're heading towards. We're heading towards decentralization again. But we might have some more tyranny along the road before, unfortunately, we can hit that path. That's what I believe. But again, the probability of the government being involved, they might have. They're trying to, have their enclaves like Blockstream and others that are out there, trying to take hold and own a certain amount of hashing power, whatever they can. But I seriously, like with Bitcoin, I don't think they're going to have a chance to be able to take it over how big it's become now. And unfortunately, they can keep on having this hash game of trying to get more, hashing power to take it over and get 51% or whatever. But again, I seriously don't think that that's possible. I think Bitcoin has become kind of a beast of itself that, it is a world currency that is just eating up the rotten fiat currencies around the world. But I'm not a maximalist, of course. We can talk about all the other cryptos, but of course that's where I see with Bitcoin itself.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Can I follow up that question, Nicole? I love that. I love the nature of the question. There's so many who wonder openly about the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto, whether it's a single actor or a group of people. I often make the joke that Satoshi may well have been the NSA or the CIA, because they've done similar false flags in the past. They've done all kinds of crazy empire building and nation building, nation toppling activities before, sometimes practically in the open. So without going to that question of like, who do you think Satoshi is? Because maybe it doesn't matter. But to follow up Nicole's question, what with the money printer machine going full speed the way it is all across North America, right? United States and Canada right now with the debt that's being accrued so fast. Do you think there's a risk of national governments, federal governments, printing their way in to a dominant position within blockchain, within cryptocurrencies, by writing themselves notes that allow them to have the purchasing power to buy up most of the liquidity?
They could. That's definitely like to actually hold the tokens. That's a potential way you could do it. You could keep on printing yourself into oblivion. Whoever is the closest to the printing press, of course, will always get win the assets and get the gain of the asset gaining value as it's more and more currency getting printed into circulation. So it's definitely do it, but I don't think seriously. I don't think governments will even want to be a part of Bitcoin because they want full control. They want 100% control over everything. They're going to come up with their own digital versions. Like here in Canada, for example, we've had Ripple and Quorum, which is the JP Morgan platform. They really worked hard to try to get a digital currency here.
They unfortunately haven't managed to do that yet. They actually got rid of Ripple and are trying to do their own kind of blockchain thing, but it's not really a blockchain. It's called real-time transfer, RTR, that Bank of Canada is currently working on. And I don't think it's going to be a successful project because they're working with, a massively old infrastructure that they have at their hands. But then again, you have guys like JP Morgan that are their own blockchain, Quorum, which is actually it seems like it's coming into fruition right now, actually, with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the central bank of Singapore. They actually worked. I think it was almost 2 years ago now that they had the first blockchain transaction between the Ripple blockchain here at Bank of Canada and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. With the Quorum blockchain. So they actually have run the scenario, like doing the transaction and sending it through the whole intermediary banking system, all the way over to from central bank through the banking system, through the other banking system in the other nation to the central bank again. So they managed to do that already. And I think the thing that I think though is because people are seeing through the fiat currencies right now. Look at, for example, Venezuela. They're on their second hyperinflation. They had one hyperinflation already with the Bolivars Fuerte, which was the first currency. Now they created a new one called Bolivar Soberano, and that one is inflating right now. Actually, the stock market of Venezuela looks very profitable, but it's because of the also purchasing power in the new currency as well. I think what's going to happen is kind of the Ecuadorian way. I did a presentation Acapulco. I don't know if you got to see that one, but we're talking about Ecuador, which was the first ever digital currency to circulate. They actually, with the help of China, so China was in heavily in the Ecuadorian government with Huawei and others, that they were able to push through the technology to have it available. But it started in 2014. They actually had to shut down on the project in 2018 because of lack of adoption. That's what I think we're going. They're desperate. They're going to try to try to corral us into this digital monetary prison, which is what they're trying to do. Which basically everybody has an account at the central bank. They might just get rid of all the banks in themselves and have just a pure communist structure where you have one central bank where everybody has their account at the central bank. That's what they really want to do. But I don't see that happening because people like freedom, even though how much you think that they might be wanting to worship government, when it gets bad enough, they will. Humans seem to be innately wanting to be free, and it just comes over time. It just becomes a natural of resisting any. When you get oppressed too much, it comes to a breaking point, and of course with fiat currency, the breaking point is that people could just leave the fiat currency. That's when hyperinflation happens because the government is not able to collect taxes anymore in the currency, and nobody's using it anymore. So then you have gold, silver, crypto, whatever it is, being used instead, and that's where we're heading. Of course,
awesome.
I believe.
Okay,
Anyways,
yeah, that makes perfect sense. That totally tracks. And to your point, people who won't be held down too long. I think that what we're seeing here in North America.
I think it comes down to the failure of the system.
Yes, totally agreed. I think right now what we're seeing in the United States, a lot of the civil unrest that has been projected onto race relations, I think much of the anxiety of the American people, it's very obviously because we've been kept indoors for months now. And so many people have been operating under austerity, basically. And it hasn't been framed as such. They haven't been told that we're living under austerity. But when you can't earn money, and then when the government's solution is to give a helicopter handout, a helicopter freebie that maybe pays for 10 days of the cost of living over 3 months. Yeah, people are ready to start burning things down and being really angry. So to your point, I'm wondering what it will take for people here to say, wow, everything else is really uncomfortable, irrespective of race relations, irrespective of the situation with COVID-19. The financial situation now is so unbearable for me that I just can't abide this and I want to opt out. Based on what you have observed and learned from your studies and from your work, are there examples of that kind of a massive exodus from a national currency in recent history outside of the Venezuelan Bolivar? And now, is it the Bolivar Soberano? Is that right? The overflow Bolivar, literally? That's what it's called? Oof, I think you're muted.
Oh, yep, John's muted. All right. Hey, you know what? You know what would probably be a great time for right now would be for our sponsor, who is Seth, to give us a message.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to jump center stage here then, guys. So tonight, this episode is sponsored by, drum roll, you're going to have to imagine it, guys, the Mineyour.biz privacy phone lineup. We have new inventory in of the Moto G6 Play. Thank you, Nicole. The Moto G6 Play. They are entirely flashed with a variant of AOSP that is custom to this phone. It's extremely non-invasive. It's the Android you know and love, but what doesn't it have? Anything from Google at all.
Sorry, Seth, you're breaking up really bad. I only am catching like every couple of syllables.
Well, I'm broadcasting out to the audience. They can hear me okay because OBS is broadcasting from my gigabit connection here. So I think I got the bandwidth that's. Yes, I'm still getting the high sign that our stream has extremely healthy bandwidth going out to it. So guys, this phone, the phones do not feature any services from Google, no Google Play Store services, no Google sign-in upon activation of the phone. What you would need to do instead is either install any Google Play Store apps that you wanted to use, or we recommend using the F-Droid store as well as the Aurora store from F-Droid. Those are entirely open source applications. So is the intent to make yourself invisible to government entities? Well, no, that's functionally impossible. The moment that you put one of these things into your pocket, you've got a tracking beacon on your person. So that's not what we're trying to do. What we are trying to do is help to keep the data fingerprint that Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft, that they have on you. So this product helps you to do that in a pain-free way. If you don't want to go flashing Android open source project onto an old phone yourself, it's already done for you. And you can even pay for it in crypto with an anonymous account shipped to whatever location you choose. So you can just have this as a phone that you choose to use without any advertisers trying to exploit your day-to-day interactions for their gain. Back to you, Nicole.
All right, awesome. So let's bring up this article that I sent to you earlier that actually Martellus sent to me because it's relevant to what's going on. The title is "The Proposed China-Iran Deal is Bad News for Israel." So the portion that I kind of want to focus on within this article, and I'm hoping that both of you, all of you, can weigh in. And it's the potential, what's going on with China's e-currency and how they are trying to, the potential for them increasing their relationship with Iran, both, because Iran is in a bad need of economic help right now, but also in order to bolster their new currency, ERMB, as a way to bypass American systems and reduce the power of the dollar. That's kind of where this all seems relevant to cryptocurrency to me. And I don't know, that maybe we should talk about it. Anyone?
Yeah, that sounds great. Martellus, why don't we go ahead and bounce this one to you, because you brought this up to Nicole.
Yeah, I think it's a bit naive to think that, the other guest is a historian. I think I heard that he's a historian in economics, right? So what we know, and I'm sure that we've all done our fair amount of research into this, how the banking system started, what the origins were, how it currently operates, and a lot of us have lost faith in it. But the amount of effort and time that went into creating that mechanism of control won't be easily relinquished. I think that the powers that be have noticed that there would be an end to this party at some point in time, and have planned for that in terms of presenting an alternative solution, i.e., Bitcoin. I also think that the amount of freedom that and anonymity even that we have in its current form is awesome. And if it just evolved into its own thing, and people were allowed to use it in the creative ways that they that they found useful, that would be great. But historically, that's not really what we see. We see that there are often mechanisms of control put in place to, I guess, sanction at the national level for sure. Cryptocurrency could be used, and again, like I said, I mean, it's in its current form awesome and free, but any time we've seen a Wild West type scenario, there's always been some kind of tyranny involved, or that came along and kind of abused or took advantage of situations that would be available to them to exercise power. So I think that China is a good example of this. China is an authoritarian regime. They are making leaps and bounds forward in terms of technology and implementation adoption. This deal that they're making with Iran is alarming to say the least, because I mean, you have a country like Iran who states openly that they want to destroy Israel, but then you have China saying that, well, they don't really mean that. That's not really their intent. They just they're just kind of mouthing off or whatever. So you have two choices there. You can say, okay, well, yeah, they don't really mean that, or they do really mean that. Which one is it? And so I mean, what I see is that ultimately Bitcoin will be used as a mechanism of control. You can easily sanction people, and right now it's free because there's no method of authentication placed on the internet as a whole. But if participation were given some requirement or criteria in advance to be even being able to access the system, which then it could easily be converted into a form of tyranny so easily. It would be just, I mean, a couple of switches that could be flipped in order to make it completely inaccessible, completely unavailable to anyone who did not adhere to certain requests by some tyrannical regime. So, I mean, those dangers are there. To ignore them, I think, is again a bit naive.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I jump in? So, as somebody who has lived in Iran, I can say that support for the Iranian government 10 years ago was extremely, extremely low among the people. And according to recent polls, it's never been as high since the Iranian Revolution. So to say that Iran wants to destroy Israel really refers to Iran's government, correct? Is that what you're trying to say? For which there's a very little potential, or for which there's very little support among the people.
Well, I think we have to examine politics at this level. So yes, it's definitely coming from a geopolitical level, not from the common people on the street. And that's what we're all experiencing. Even the things that we were, discussing in terms of living under austerity, even though it's not, being exacted and declared. These are our own personal experiences. But if we're going to analyze the situation in a way that we are going to attempt to determine how things could play out at the national level, we have to keep that on the basis of politics. And so, yes, absolutely. I think that the Iranian regime is perhaps, not those, it may not be at its most popular point in history, but at the same time, they are still a very powerful regime.
That's a fair
You don't think
point.
Iran is Iran a powerful regime? I would ask that question. Or are there strategic alliances giving them strength that maybe they wouldn't have by themselves?
Huh. I think, yeah, it would be great for John to weigh in right here. What do you think?
Well, I think that the whole Iran Israeli thing is it's the U.S. on the one side with backing Israel. They have it, especially now when you see like Donald Trump, getting moving the capital of Israel, the embassy to Jerusalem, I believe, and all this stuff. Like they're really lobbying for Israel to be heard as the great nation, and I think it comes all down to religion on both sides. When I really take a look at the two governments, it's especially in Israel, they believe that they are the one people that's gonna take over and be there when the whole what do you call it, the not revelation but the apocalypse comes or whatever it is. And Iranians are also on the one side, they are also hate the Saudis because they're different types of Muslim Shias versus
Sunni.
the Wahhabis, and yeah, Sunni, sorry, yeah. And then of course that has always been a tension. It's funny when it comes to centralization, anything like governments, religion, anything. They always seem to gain more and more power, and then they become more and more toxic over time, because you have that thought that you're superior to others. Now, of course, we got to look at what does Iran have that of course the U.S. backing of it. Of Israel, as of course they got a ton of oil that that's what the U.S. Empire built itself upon. They're really sniffing out the oil that Iran has, and they want to help other like countries like Saudi Arabia eradicate, for example, Syria, so they could build a pipeline and then compete with the Nord Stream pipeline that the Iranian Russian backed pipeline has, that's called Nord Stream 2, that is getting built now through Denmark and so on. So it's all, I think it's a commodity based game here where they really want control. I don't see the Israelites as and the whole nation there is more up towards basically it's hard to tell because they don't have too many resources per se, other than intelligence and spying.
They have
Down in
Leviathan.
Israel,
They have Leviathan. Leviathan is a considerable resource that could actually solve the world's energy problems for the next 50 years. Leviathan is a serious find.
Okay, so I'm going to pull this up live for our audience in a browser tab so that we can, as a central talking point, we can bring this back up down the line. All right, so because Leviathan as a resource that could be sought after, that could be the primary cause for any other nation states targeting Israel. Let's expand on that just a little bit, if you don't mind. For those who aren't familiar with Leviathan, give us the Eli 5 treatment.
So I'm interested in it's I believe a natural gas reserve under the Mediterranean off the coast of Lebanon, Turkey. And were you addressing me? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just cut somebody off there.
Yes, please, Martellus, please.
Okay, so it's a significant find. There's conflict. Turkey lays claim to some of it. Lebanon feels like they should be involved as well. But as it stands, I believe that Israel is laying a major claim to that find, and it's basically an energy reserve that could, I guess, contribute significantly to resolving some of the world's energy reserve problems.
Got it. I've pulled up a Wikipedia page for it. It's a poor replacement for anything authoritative, but it gives us a few of the basic stats. Great. Okay, and it looks like, at least according to Wikipedia, the country that maintains ownership of the Leviathan gas field is Israel. So sounds like Israel is the guy to beat, so to speak, in order to claim ownership over Leviathan gas field, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So
I mean, they do have. I mean, Israel is a resource, just based on that alone, is a resource rich. Now, I mean, Libya as well. Libya is just swimming in it, and Russia's seeking to set up a base there now. I think that it's significant to pay attention to these sorts of things, because there is a lot going on in terms of just not just colonialization, but control of resources at hand that some of the larger players in the game have a vested interest in. Russia is definitely interested in having a bigger hand in what happens in Libya. And we can see that just by strategic alliances that they've made with Haftar, who is against the Accord regime that's largely supported by the United Nations, the international community. So, I mean, it's not merely a game of resources, but resources do definitely come into play.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. You got to look at everything, put everything out on the board, so to speak, before before strategizing. Okay, apologies for the interruption. I just wanted to make sure that we were all.
I apologize for interrupting the other guest. Please continue from that point. We were talking about Israel.
So Israel's kind of, I mean, in cryptocurrency, a lot of us are conspiracy theorists, and Israel's like a focal point within conspiracy theory in terms of their involvement in the world economy. Right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So, I don't know, does this have anything to do with their control of the Leviathan? For anyone?
Yeah, go ahead, anyone.
Well, when it comes to the biggest resource of it all, it's always currency, and that's what can buy the resources in the first place, and extract them. If you have the money, if you can print the money to create the infrastructure to be able to extract the resources, then you become very powerful and a great resource to to the actual community, the world community, because you have potentially a unique resource that could be easily refined and all this stuff. And then, of course, all the way throughout history, they have time and time again, they had different resources that they had control over. But what ended them was the actual printing of the currency itself, and that's where it doesn't matter how much resources you sit on. If you have a currency that is worthless to the populace that needs to use it to survive. For example, any revolution, any currency that have failed usually starts when it actually has. Look at, for example, in France, the Yellow Vest movement, before they shut everybody down. When COVID-19 came in, nobody can protest anymore. But people were out in the streets protesting that they couldn't put food on the table because they couldn't afford it, because the purchasing power has diminished so much from what they were getting to now that they couldn't be able to put food on the table. So it doesn't matter how much resources you have as a country. If you mismanage your currency, there will be a revolution in your country, and people will not be using that currency anymore. And if that was the power that you had to then be able to trade with other nations and that currency becomes worthless, then it doesn't matter. Look at Venezuela, how much resources you sit on, you become a poor country. And we've seen that, time and time again throughout history where nations, they might be extremely rich and wealthy on resources, but then over time, they just destroy themselves by this currency printing, by diminishing the purchasing power of their currency. And at one point, nobody wants to deal with you anymore because your currency is worthless. That's the same for Israel and others. I believe that the U.S. will probably be the last currency standing before they try to do a reset. I think, especially the worst ones right now that I see could, be demolished is actually the country that I live in right now, which is Canada. Our currency is going to get whacked severely because our central bank is the second after Venezuela printing currency right now. We've increased our balance sheet by, I think I ran the numbers yesterday, was 330%. Meanwhile, the nearest competitor is right now is actually Argentina, and then it's the United States after that. And so you're seeing that there's going to be periphery nations, I believe, first that's going to topple and fall, and then because everybody still are addicted to the U.S. dollar reserve currency system, that they're still going to use it until there's no security left in it. Everybody can come in and jump in on the U.S. dollar and make it strong, but then when you're trading like you are today, when you financialize the world, when you're going to exit from that asset? What are you going to exit out of it into? You're not going to go back to the failing currencies. I think most likely they're going to look for assets that they seem as solid. Of course, gold and silver has always been there. They're still going to be there this time around. But they're also going to be cryptocurrencies that they're going to deem that are safer because they have a set amount of currencies, units in circulations and so on. I think that's what could happen. But again, like looking at geopolitics and how nations will fight with each other over resources. It doesn't matter. There's been a lot of countries, like North Korea. They've been talking about all the so what do you call them? The super help me here. There's rare earth metals that they're sitting on, for example. There's been talk about, Venezuela sits on the biggest reserves of oil in the world, no, second biggest or something after Saudi Arabia. So doesn't matter how much resources you sit on, you're going to have the currency to be able to extract it. And if you are not able to put in that infrastructure, you could sit on the greatest resource in the world, and it will not enrich you whatsoever.
Right. I think we've seen that, with countries like Saudi Arabia, where they did have the United States set up the world reserve currency and assist them in extracting those resources. And I think that we'll probably see the same thing in countries like Venezuela and Libya. I think that the Russians are going to be there to help them down that road, and they will in turn become very influential and rich nations. I think all of Eastern Africa and North Africa will become far more influential long term than they are at present.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And this is because they're sitting on so much resources that, human beings need if we're going to continue our society.
They just need a friend to help them, right? And Russia's there to be that. Turkey's there to be that.
Yeah, and of course.
But Turkey has
and
more.
China as well.
Okay, yeah, this is
with One Belt, especially with One Belt, One Road, and the Asia Investment Bank, the Asia Investment and Infrastructure Bank. They are trying to basically rip off the IMF and do the exact same thing with the AIB that the U.S. has done with the IMF. They're going into countries and then they, of course, borrow them up to the teeth. It was just recently with Zambia. I don't know if you guys heard about this story, but they took the airport and one of the biggest hydro dams there that the Chinese took over because they couldn't afford to pay them back. So they basically have, there's predators. And of course, it's funny how they use exactly copycatting the United States, the predatory lending that, I basically call the IMF a loan shark, and that's what they are. And that, of course, unfortunately, China has adopted that policy. Now, When it comes to Russia, Russia is a very interesting nation. I used to be up in Norway, and when I used to be on the Russian-Norwegian border, working for the Norwegian military, we used to spy on the Russians, and I learned a lot about what the Russians are up to up there. And of course, Russians, the Putin, he's a very, very smart guy. He always like gives people enough freedoms in his own country. But then on the other side, if you do oppose him, I have friends that have parents that have opposed him that have been basically thrown out of the country and lost their business. So it's interesting. Russia is more like, for a lot of people that I talked to, Russia seemed like the more stable nation. That they're smart, but again, it's run by, we can't forget that of course Putin, he was former KGB, him and his buddies, when they actually then created the FSB, which is the current KG version of the KGB.
Security apparatus, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like they still have the same, but again, Putin has been smart with actually giving the people that are in the nation more freedoms by giving them a more free market on the local basis. So he's been, but it's interesting how we always levitate towards wanting leaders and people controlling us, because human beings becomes complacent and give up, willing to give up more and more of the freedoms if it's more convenient and easy over time. And that just happens every single time.
Exactly.
Yeah, for example, the first paper currency that ever existed was started by the Song Dynasty in China in 1024. The Chinese are this is no surprise to them that they're using this system. They were the inventors of paper currency. They actually took that, they initially backed it by coinage, which was copper currency. And then over time, what they did is within like 40, 50 years, they started to lend money. They had what was called the Chinese miracle, economic miracle. It was written about in the history books, where everybody felt quite wealthy. But then suddenly over time, they had felt wealthy. But then suddenly their currency started to lose more and more of its value. And then the people that are saving in it, and then they stop kind of like lending money, and it started to shrink the money supply. And of course, that's the enemy of any fiat currency, that needs to increase. And if you actually borrow with interest, so what happened was that they started to have food prices and everything were starting to go up. They actually abandoned their backing that they had on the currency. So they basically went full fiat in about I think it was 1070, 1080. And then after that, they just started print more and more. And so this is two ways that it could go. A nation in severe distress with their monetary system will either go to war or will get attacked by someone that's
to take out a weak opponent. So what happened with the Sung Dynasty? The Mongols came in with the Qin Dynasty that the Mongols had, and they took over China. Then, of course, they took over the Sung Dynasty. And then what they did is they had what's called the Southern Sung Dynasty and the Qin Dynasty. After that, they both adapted to fiat currency again, did the same mistake over 100 years. That currency failed. Then you had probably one of the greatest empires ever happening after that. You had the Yuan government, which was run by Kublai Khan. And everybody knows about Genghis Khan, that is also called, of course. And he had, vast empire that he spread. Funny enough, the Middle East he never managed to get into because they were all over. The Ottomans were all over gold and silver, and they believed that had power, and they weren't willing to actually burn his currency in the streets. It says in the history book. So it's very interesting how that happens, and how the Chinese actually are calling their currency the yuan, other than the renminbi, of course, but they're also calling it the yuan. To honor, Genghis Khan and the great empire that he had, because I think that the Chinese really wants to just copy and become a great empire like the United States was by this whole Belt and Road initiative that they had. They've been building infrastructure, but very much smart to do that, because when you build infrastructure, you can transport things, you can extract things, and so on. So they've been doing it a little bit different than the United States have done sometimes, where they just go in and bomb people instead of, taking them over by building them infrastructure that they can't afford, and then they can just take it over like the Chinese did, instead of just bombing you because you have oil that the United States have done. Bad tactics. But I think the Chinese are very intelligent, but unfortunately they're extremely totalitarian and a technocratic state.
So, John, there's quite a bit of distortion coming through your audio on my end. Our audience will hear a very garbled audio
to control everything. So, it's interesting how it works, and I think it's a warning sign, to everyone that we need to be aware of, what everybody's intentions are on a global scale, because I think all governments have different ways of doing things, but they all want control over resources and over as many people as possible to then extract taxes from.
Okay, nobody's talking. Call.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind copying and pasting that invite to him separately, that would be helpful. I apologize, John. I gave you a heads up there that there's a bit of distortion that comes through on my end, and if it comes through on my end, I'm encoding this for broadcast, so it makes it very difficult for the audience to understand what you're saying. But I appreciate the line of thinking.
So we're at just over an hour. I know that both of our guests have something that they want to, promote, or at least themselves, or some kind of message that they want to bring up. But before we do that, maybe we should just address something that came up in our comments a little bit earlier, saying, don't worry, all this nonsense will go away after November. So thank you. Who was it? Yankee? Yeah, if you're still watching. So Yankee's always active in the discussion, or at least has been for the last couple of weeks. So I don't know exactly what he means by that. Seth, you said that you tend to agree. I don't know what you mean exactly. Do you mean the virus itself, or do you mean all this, world news that's diverting people's attention to all different places?
So what I think that Yankee's referring to, so Yankee, as his internet handle implies, he is from the United States. He's he lives he's from a very freedom-loving state in the United States, and I think he's looking at it from the domestic viewpoint of a U.S. citizen, not COVID-19, but the very draconian measures that we're seeing in places like California to try to get it back into check. So, like we've seen, for example, the population that's most grievously affected by COVID-19, people who are over 65 and who already have pre-existing conditions. That does not describe the majority of Americans. It doesn't describe the majority of many first world countries in terms of the demographic breakdown, like how their population is it can be described as very, very different, right? So when you have a virus that is super deadly to people who are of a certain age range, and you shut down all of society, shut down all of commerce, which is primarily run by people who are below that age, and people who are not receiving a pension, people who are not recipients of whatever the social safety net is, Social Security, which we've been told, right, for years is going to disappear for this generation. Now it's all but assured because they're not working. They're not contributing to Social Security for the last 3 months. And we'll see if over the next 3 months or the next 6 months, if the United States has to start announcing closures there. But I think what Yankee is saying is, oh, by the way, most of those measures that are being called for by people who are politically left of center and just don't like Donald Trump. I think that's what he's referring to. And
Okay.
I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole. But what I'll do is just kind of nod in agreement so we can move on. That could very well be true to some extent. To what extent? I don't think we have time to discuss. And I think maybe we should get back to the topic at hand. But since you bring it up, we may well see the situation change here in the United States shift by 20 degrees or more when we get to November, just because we'll get into election season and there will be no political motive to draw out some of these measures.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I'm just thinking, maybe it's just because I'm living within the system right now, but I can't really imagine things just going back to, to how they were. And I understand with what's going on with the hyperinflation of the US economy, with the Fed just like printing money, how could we say that things are going to just go back after November? I mean, I don't know.
They can't. You're right. Genie's out of the bottle. Financially, Genie's out of the bottle. We're good and screwed. I mean,
okay.
The printed money won't go back in the printer, right? That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah, but
right.
That's not my forte. Let's get our guests' take on that for sure.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Seth. It's not a very good scenario. I think right now we're living on reserves. I think the supply chains have been interrupted. The resources are going to become more and more scarce as time goes by. People are going to become more and more discontent about that lack of resources, and you'll see more conflict, undoubtedly. I don't think that Trump is in any way the solution to that problem. I don't think that Joe Biden is in any way the solution to that problem. I think that there's a real issue here that could very well result in a massive change geopolitically worldwide. Again, the United States has been operating in a unipolar sense in terms of power globally for a long time. And I think what we're seeing here is a trend away from that.
Yeah, totally agreed. John, we're hearing your audio come through clear. Oh, no.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think like what the whole hole that the United States also has put themselves into is there's no way to get out of it ever, other than printing, of course, tremendous amounts of currency and just continue the whole Ponzi scheme deal. They just gotta keep on pushing down the envelope. We're gonna see probably more and more push towards actually having UBI, universal basic income. I think we're gonna see here in Canada we have something called ZERB. Which is basically our replacement to just give people, money so they could actually survive when they're off work, and they actually get tremendous amount, up to 85% of their salary that they get through that. Yeah, it's a ridiculous program. It's just up to $80 billion right now. It sounds not much in the United States terms, but for Canada terms, that's almost 3 times a regular bad deficit, which is terrible, 30 billion. So I think they can actually push those programs that they currently have out, countries like Norway, all in Northern Europe, that they have these, workers replacement programs. They're going to all merge into a universal basic income. That's the only way they could really, keep this system going. Now, of course, you've seen, as the other guest said, that you have mass disruptions in supply chains. I see it actually. In my regular daytime job, I work with in the surveillance and low voltage and all that industry. So I actually install cameras and alarm systems, automation, and all that stuff. And we just saw the biggest. So this is the second biggest alarm company in the world. Had a manufacturing plant down in Mexico that shut down for good because of COVID-19.
Wow.
And then they had to move their whole manufacturing over to Canada again, which they used to have. And so now they're just scrambling, and they haven't even gotten the control panels out yet. They actually can provide so you can have an alarm in your house. So it's there's some serious disruptions here. I work with another guy that has a construction company. They have massive lack in pressure treated wood, green pressure treated wood. So there's supply chain disruptions everywhere, and of course, like, the government is stupid that think that you could shut down the economy and restart it again. How stupid can you actually be when you think that, you could just flick a switch and then it's right back on where it was? No, it's not, because people lost their jobs, and then all these corporations, they were in heavy debt, of course, and they couldn't pay their debt. So here in Canada, you have 25 to 30% that will go bankrupt now because of this whole measure, and the same in the United States probably as well.
Yeah, I think the
So
last
these
figures.
companies-
Apologies for the interruption, John. If you can hear this, I think that the last figures that I read, and this is from Consumer News, right? So I question the validity of this, but I think the last thing I read is that we're starting to see a wave of about 35% of strategic default in consumer debt and in services like cell phone bills and such, telecom bills. But about 35% of at least on the consumer side, people just saying can't pay.
Yeah, no, and that's normal because they let people extend their loans, their house payments and everything here in Canada as well. But it comes to a certain point, and now they're starting to not do that anymore. And that's when the bill comes due. There's no money there to pay them, and people are just gonna walk away and say like, I can't afford this. I'd rather just go bankrupt. They don't have a mortgage or anything to worry about, so just bankruptcy is the normal way out. I would never go that route because I know that I would lose my house and everything if I did. But that's what most people, the only options that they have out is to do that because they can't afford to pay food. See, we're coming back to that again. We're coming back to, people got to put food on the table and water in their mouth. Like humans needs fuel to survive. And if we don't, we're screwed. So that's why we're always seeing that being the most prominent figure throughout history that we actually go back to again. But again, like all this printing, there's going to be no precedent whatsoever and no government that's going to save us from the crisis that they actually created themselves. Let's be honest here. They actually created this crisis very much themselves by shutting down the whole economy and then quarantining people everywhere. Now, I live in Manitoba, Canada, a province here. We've had 13 days without any coronavirus cases here. And we're seeing that they're now talking about mandatory masks to open up the economy. Like we have no virus here. You're not letting in any people in, and it's just totalitarian medical tyranny that they're trying to see how they could corral people and how far can they push it. I just feel like, this is my honest opinion, I just feel like they're trying to really push the envelope of seeing how far down the rabbit hole of totalitarianism they could go before they get pushback from the general populace. I think they're starting to see some though, because but the thing is, they divided and conquered us so well now that there's the left and the right are just terribly opposing each other. Meanwhile, libertarians, anarchists are in the middle saying like, you guys are buffoons here. You're basically being taught to hate each other. Meanwhile, why don't we work this out? Let the government default on their debt. Let the old system collapse, and let's rebuild from there. Because our generation here, like most of us are, millennials here, or Generation X, and we are gonna be the next ones having to build, upon what we've been left. And I just think they should just let it go, because if they don't, we're gonna be so delayed of trying to rebuild, society back up again to some decency. If we don't, if they don't pass the torch to us. So I think like there's gonna be no politicians that's ever gonna save us. Look at a good example is look at the Roman Empire, the end of it. The politics and they started to kill each other, the politicians back in the day at the end of the Roman Empire. And I think that's where you're heading. Like, look at Hillary Clinton and others, not to mention, sorry for name dropping, but
yeah, thanks.
There's certain people that have a lot of,
Tell my wife I love her. Yeah, it's
around.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's I think politics is dead. Like the whole governing system that we have today is dead. And the people that are stuck in the old ways are still not understanding it and not willing to let it go. And I think unfortunately they're gonna they're gonna go out kicking and screaming. Unfortunately, that's what I think, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I think
so you want a mandate off fast approach or solution to this problem. They should just pass the torch. Let's get it over with quick and done, and
Yeah.
things will probably go a lot better that way. I tend to agree with you, but I think that that's probably going to materialize in the form of war. I was talking to Nicole, and one of the ways I ended up participating here tonight was because we were discussing the possibilities of what could happen in order to bypass this. They've got some real issues to deal with in terms of population, in terms of supplies, in terms of how they're going to maintain the manageability of the power structure. It's just absolutely not possible at this point. There would be a total collapse, and you would have, pieces and parts flying off the handle, and you would have different factions and clans establishing centers of power globally, and you would never be able to put it back together again. I think their only solution is war, and I think that's probably the way that they've designed for themselves to get through it and to be able to maintain control of the global economic system on the other side of it.
That's
Yeah.
it's very scary.
Yeah, sorry, I totally agree there.
It's a very scary proposal there, gentlemen. We've gone a little past the hour. Let me engage our audience really fast. So we've had some really heavy thoughts dropped on us by our two guests. Martalis, we brought up the 3-letter, 4-letter word, war. And we also had John bringing up his desire to just have the government rip the Band-Aid off, just let it go, let things run again, let things run their natural course. But for the audience that's listening in, what do you think? Is war inevitable at this point? Has it been orchestrated to seem like an inevitable choice, as absurd as it may seem? What do you guys tell us down in the comment section? Nicole, you asked both of our guests if they had a cause or if they had or any kind of a professional interest that they wanted to promote, because we've reached the hour.
Yes, I did. So I don't know which order we want to go in, guys, but you're here. That's what the point of media is, at least some of it. We're trying to share information and sort of anything that you want to promote, or anything that you want our audience to know about.
Okay, for my part, I am involved in small outreach. Again, at the beginning of the show, I think Nicole mentioned that I work with migrants and Muslim communities, and I primarily try to, I guess, share what I know about the Western worldview with them, and to help them adapt and maybe make some changes in their own worldview that would possibly make them more comfortable here. So that's basically as far into it as I really want to get. But that's
okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
May I go ahead and just share with our audience? There's a link that's publicly listed on your Twitter handle. It's martellus.com. Is that something?
Correct.
Okay. Will you go ahead and bring
Absolutely. If anybody wants to support our cause, that would be the way to do it. If anybody wants to know about things more specifically, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to go into some of the details.
Excellent. And John, thank you so much, Martella, for sharing. John.
Yeah, no, you can find anything that I'm up to at theeconomictruth.org. I'm a part of a whole wide array of different organizations trying to make a change. We have a very interesting organization I work on with G. Edward Griffin, of the guy that wrote the book The Creature from Jekyll Island, called the Red Pill University and the Red Pill Expo. That we have there, where we're trying to educate the population in the United States about recurring issues when it comes to trusting big government, big pharma, all this, the old system, and trying to educate them on what's available for options outside of the matrix. So that's one of the major things that I'm involved in. And of course, I do a lot of economic research. I put about 95% of it up for free on either theeconomictruth.org, and you can actually follow me. If you go to my website, you can actually go and click and join the Discord group that I have, where we have a group of tightly knit people that actually discuss money and economics and geopolitics on an everyday basis. So we're about 200 people now, and we just started about 3-4 months ago, me and a financial advisor that Nicole knows very well, Tim Pichot. So I think those two things, and of course you can find my books that I used to educate. I sold over 3,000 copies right now in Canada, and I'm just trying to educate people about what's coming for Canada, but it's also a book for every other nation to see what, how this whole system will play itself out. And I think it's so important to educate as many people as possible before the total collapse are coming, because then people are more stronger to make a possible better better choice for themselves and for our future, instead of acting unfair that unfortunately the current system is based upon.
Okay, phenomenal. Thank you both. Can I ask you each individual? We'll jump back to Martellus and just ask. We've discussed some things that I think for many people, if they're not looking at them very closely, they might find not distasteful, but maybe a little bit scary, right? May induce some anxiety. To ease that anxiety, is there a group or an area of the world, or maybe something people can do locally, right, to be able to focus that anxiety towards action? Something that people can do right where they are to help improve the situation as you see it.
Absolutely. I wouldn't. I wouldn't present any of this information in order to cause fear for anyone. As a matter of fact, I would want them to be encouraged by it, because there is inevitable change on the horizon. I think that what we see right now with all of the upheaval and turmoil and discontent that's happening in culture is basically an effort for us. We've been striving to maintain some sort of conflict-free, comfortable existence that we once knew about, but may not any longer be the case. So I think what I would encourage people to do is to not be afraid of anything, and to just take this opportunity to look at life like as just one big opportunity to be courageous and to do things that you would not have normally done if you had been stuck in the status quo. We're no longer in the status quo. We're free from the status quo now, and we can step out and we can engage in and pursue goals that we never thought we might have otherwise. So I do want people to be encouraged in terms of whether or not there's a war. I don't think it's the thing to keep in. I don't think the self-preservation should be our motivation. I think the doing good and being supportive of our fellow man and showing as much love to everybody that we can throughout the whole process is the best approach to that. And if we do that, I think that we'll come out okay on the other side of it.
Okay, phenomenal. Thank you so much. That is extremely reassuring to that stance. John, can I toss that same question back over to you? Many people who've been tuning in tonight or who will watch the replay will wonder, wow, what do I make of this? What do I do with this?
Well, and it's kind of same what Tel said there. It's all about, like, from my point of view, I speak to a lot of local organizations, not lately, of course, of the crazy COVID crisis, but I talk to them, it's time for you to localize and meet people around you and start, build a community of people that can, function throughout any crisis, more resilient communities, more self-reliant communities. I think that's where the strength of any future of our or any civilization is going to be, is by heavily self-reliant, but then cooperating with others on a grand scale. But we need to be more localized in the way of resilience, because that we've seen right now, with the massive disruptions in supply chains, that we weren't we were reliant on massive there's something coming from Mexico or something coming from another country in order to almost survive sometimes, and that creates a huge strain. If you could get together as a community and build that reliance on a local level in hundreds of millions upon millions of different communities around the world, become more self-reliant, but then also still have the interconnectedness that we have today with this world, and then remove government and teach people that you don't need the government to have a solid community and society that we could build upon. think about where we could go and what we could create if we actually, had organizations, because we can create them that we could cooperate on doing something better for the earth and for the humanity. Like, let's do space travel, let's do this and that, instead of having all these regulations that are just destroying and eviscerating, any form of research and development that could, really forward humanity into, such a grander, achievement than where we are right now, because they're stuck in the fiat paradigm, and we need to get out of it. We need to evolve basically as human beings and go back to the old ways, but then also incorporate all the new great things that we have, and then start building a fantastic world out of the rubble, because the whole empire and the whole nation state system is kind of falling apart. And I do see like the decentralization, but then also through the interconnectedness, being able to cooperate around the world and do great things for humanity.
Okay, that's also very hope affirming. Really appreciate you helping us wrap it up and conclude on that note. Nicole, I'm curious, and I know you may have been preparing for this. Based on what I'm hearing, let's synthesize a little bit of what our guests have said here, and
what about things?
And let's let me frame a question for you real fast. Synthesizing a bit of what our guests have given us here. Do you think that in this new paradigm, potentially moving forward, where there may be a need to retract and function much more locally, a la tribes, right? And leaning on tribalism in its best expression, what do you think the role of national identity or greater identity is moving forward from this? How do we resolve that?
My thoughts on what our guests have said?
Yes. Yes, please.
Sorry, it's my connection is really bad, so I'm only getting every couple of words right now. Sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less. I think I need to get my own internet connection.
Okay, so
okay.
Yeah, your thoughts on our guests' fine. Wrap up. What do you think?
I'm gonna break down and do it.
Okay.
Sorry, so I don't even know what the question was because I'm not getting every word.
Okay, so taking as a whole what our guests have talked about as far as acting in a much more local fashion and building relationships locally, some might call that returning to tribalism, or having to rely on creating local tribes. How do we resolve that in a world that prizes and values national identity and larger collectivism?
Ooh, you want me to, like, I don't know. If I could solve that, then maybe I could win a peace prize, right? What do I think that people can do? I don't know. I guess, what John and Martellus have both suggested, I would agree with. People need to work with people who are locally, but I don't know what we're going to do when we have to start working with one another again. I feel like that's kind of where we're at in cryptocurrency, is that everybody's kind of broken into their own little development groups, little promotion groups, instead of working together as a whole. And maybe that those fences are starting to mend. But I don't know what can really be done, if that's what the question is. And I think that that's what your question was.
It totally was. You knocked it out of the park. Great job, Nerd Girl. All right, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've gone about an hour and a half, a little past an hour and a half here. Nicole, how do you want to wrap the show? Any other questions for our guests?
No, I think that last one was the most important. What do you want to promote, right? Where can people get in touch with you? And we're going to put those in the description for both of these nice gentlemen's Twitter handles. What do I want to promote? Well, our t-shirts. I'm wearing one of them. I have an idea for another one in my head that's actually an altcoin shirt. I'm excited about trying to make it happen, but we can't upload new designs right now, which is frustrating. And then next week we have Roger Veer coming on to talk about crypto tribalism and then what's going on with Bitcoin Cash.
Hex yes. All right, guys, you see on the screen next to me all of NerdGrl's designs on Mineyour.biz. Go and purchase them liberally. You can use the cryptocurrency of your choice, or you can just pay in dirty fiat. We'll accept any of your money. We're dirty capitalists. Go ahead and support the show that way.
Yep.
Right. To both of our guests, Martellus and John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. We will be sure that guests who have been able to tune in, that they know where to find you. And we encourage you guys yet again, go be supportive of what they're working on.
Thank you.
And lovely audience, that we say good night.